And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. This is the first Benchley night in a long time. I'm not sure I remember how to do Benchley nights anymore. Well, I believe mostly what I need to do is blather for a minute, and then I read a short story. But oh my goodness, the unidentified ungulate is all the way over there. I'm gonna have to just go with the salt shaker instead. So it goes. So, ladies and gentlemen, last week I went and I took the train from Albany, New York to Toronto, and then Toronto to Saskatchewan, to Saskatoon on Via Rails Canadian. And it was a wonderful, wonderful trip. It was a wonderful trip. All of you out there, if you're looking for one train trip to take Via Rails Canadian. It's beautiful 1950s equipment, wonderfully maintained. If you don't go through the Rockies, it's affordable. If you go through the Rockies, it gets a little pricey. But I mean, I got a berth from Toronto to Saskatoon. It was like 475 Canadian, which is like 380 US for 2 nights on board with all my meals. Wonderful people, wonderful time. Anyway, I returned back, and one of the other great things is that there's no cell phone or Wi-Fi or anything for most of the trip. So you are not having to pay attention to the awful things that human beings are doing to one another. And human beings are very good at doing awful things to one another or to dogs named Cricket. But it was just lovely to get away from all of that. But it's a joy to be back, and I'll be back all this month. So we're going to have Benchley nights. I was thinking, how would you guys feel about my reading Homer Price? Do you guys know Homer Price? Probably people best know the story of the donuts. But it's like a very gentle satire of America in kind of the middle of the 20th century. I was thinking of reading those stories because I missed getting to read the Paul Revere's Ride. That'll have to wait for another year. But anyway, it's great to be here. It's great that you're all still willing to listen to Benchley nights. I think we're now 4 years into doing them. And we raise a couple $100 every week for one good cause or another. And the good cause this week, ladies and gentlemen, the good cause this week is Doctors Without Apparent Borders. Because Doctors Without Apparent Borders, they go out there. Doctors Without Apparent Boundaries, that's the name of it. They go out there where people are doing horrible things to one another and they try to patch them up. And we thank them for doing that. We have a few people to thank. We have Mr. Rick Gavatsky. We have Mr. John T. Wilhelm, who is on, I believe, Amtrak train number 5, even as we speak. Mr. John T. Wilhelm. Ms. Catherine Fisher. Ms. Catherine Fisher doing great paintings. Catherine. Out there in Cincinnati, Ohio, Roots on the Rails, tribe member, our good friend, Mr. J.T. Mayer. Let's see. Did I go past where they start calling her gas? It's Paul Gustafson. Don't know what that is. So I might have. Ms. Martha Rowley out there in Saxon's River, which is now cut off from the rest of Bellows Falls, but from the rest of Rockingham. Thank you, Martha Rowley. You may notice I have this cough. I had the cough before I left on the train trip, but then hotels and trains and hotels and trains and hotels aren't good for coughs, but I'm getting better. I'm getting better, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Jim Frisk up there in St. Albans, Vermont, who took that train across Canada just a few weeks before I did. Mr. Jim Frisk, out there in Taos, New Mexico, with her little dog Fergus, who gets so excited when it's play day. Out there with Fergus and Ms. Tess, the always disgusted cat. My good friend, Ms. Meg Miser. Out there in Missouri, in Fulton, Missouri, surrounded by sheep whose peace she keeps. Ms. Carol Fulkerson. Sorry, I just swallowed wrong. And lastly, out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Out there in Pittsburgh. How's the team doing? Nat? I'm looking at comments right now so you can say how they're doing. But a good friend of the Pirates and a good friend of his wee little dog Ginger. My very, 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 very tall cousin, Mr. Nat Hunter, and his wonderful wife, Elise. All right. That takes care of that. And now it is time for the boys' camp business. There seems to be an idea prevalent amongst parents today that a good way to solve the summer problem for the boy is to send him to a boys' camp. At any rate, the idea seems to be prevalent in the advertising pages of the magazines. If all the summer camps for boys and girls turn out the sterling citizens in embryo that they claim to do, the future of this country is as safe as if it were in the hands of a governing board consisting of the 12 apostles. From the folders and advertisements, we learn that Camp Waumaganson in the foothills of the White Mountains sends yearly into the world a bevy of strong, manly boys ready for the duties of citizenship and equipped to face life with a clear eye and a keen mind. It does not say anything about their digestions, but I suppose they are in tip-top shape too. Let's see. Oh, very tall cousin says, Pirates are 14 wins and 15 losses. Uh-oh, the fulcrum is tipped. Uh-oh. Well, hope springs eternal. The outlook for the next generation of mothers is no less dazzling. Camp Wawilla for girls, we learn, pays particular attention to the spiritual development of tomorrow's women. And compared to the civic activities of the majority of alumni of Wawilla, those of Florence Nightingale or Frances Willard would have to be listed just under the heading of junior girls' work. Now, this is all very splendid, and it is comforting to think that when every boy and girl goes to Waumaganset or Wawilla, there will be no more younger generation problem and probably no more crime waves worth mentioning. But there are several other features that go hand in hand with sending the boy or the girl to camp, which I would like to take up from the parents' point of view, if I may. I will limit myself to 20 minutes. In the first place, when your boy comes home from camp, he is what is known in the circular as manly and independent. This means that when you go swimming with him, he pushes you off the raft and jumps on your shoulders, holding you underwater until you are as good as drowned. Better, in fact. Before he went to camp, you used to take a kindly interest in his swimming and tell him to take your time, take it easy, with a feeling of superiority, which, while it may have had no foundation in your own natatorial prowess, nevertheless was one of the few points of pride left to you in your obese middle age. After watching one of these heroes dive off a tower and swim underwater to the raft and back, there was a sort of balm in being able to turn to your son and to show him how to do the crawl stroke, even though you yourself were not one of the 7 foremost crawl stroke experts in the country. You could do it better than your son could, and that was saying something. It was also very comforting to be able to stand on the springboard and say, "Now, watch Daddy. See? Hands like this. Bend your knees. See?" The fact that such exhibitions usually culminated in your landing heavily on the area bounded by the knees and the chest was embarrassing, perhaps, but at that, you were not quite so bad as the boy when he tried the same thing. But after a summer at camp, the manly, independent boy comes back and makes you look a bit like Horace Greeley in his later years. "Do this one, Dad," he says, turning a double flip off the springboard and cutting into the water like a knife. If you try it, you sprain your back. If you do not try it, your self-respect and your prestige are shattered. The best thing to do is to pretend not to hear him. You can do this by disappearing under the surface every time it looks as if you were going to pull a new one. After a while, however, this ruse gets you pretty soggy and waterlogged, and you might better just go in and get dressed as rapidly as possible. The worst phase of this newfound independence is the romping instinct that seems to be developed to a high state of obnoxiousness at all boys' camps. I went to camp when I was a boy, but I do not remember being as unpleasant about my fun as boys today seem to be. I have done many mean things in my time. I have tortured flies. I have kicked crutches out from under cripples' arms. But I have never, so help me Confucius, pushed anybody off a raft or come up behind anyone in the water and jumped up on his shoulders. And I don't think that Lincoln ever did that either. There's evidently a course in raft pushing and back jumping in boys' camps today. Those photographs that you see in the camp advertisements, if you examine them at all closely, it will disclose in 9 cases out of 10 a lot of boys pushing each other off rafts. You can't see the ones who are jumping on each other's shoulders as they are underwater. But I want to serve notice right now that the next boy who pushes me off a raft when I am not looking or tries to play leapfrog over me in 10 feet of water is going to be made practically useless as tomorrow's citizen. And I am going to do it myself, too. If it happens to be my own son, it will just make the affair all the sadder. Another thing that these manly boys learn at camp is a savage habit of getting up at sunrise. The normal healthy boy should be a very late sleeper. Who does not remember in his own normal healthy boyhood having to be called 3, 4, or even 5 times in the morning before it seems sensible to get up. One of the happiest memories of childhood is that of the maternal voice calling up from downstairs, fading away into silence, and the realization that it would be possibly 15 minutes before it called again. All this is denied to the boy who goes off to a summer camp. When he comes home, he is so steeped in the pernicious practice of early rising that he cannot shake it off. Along about 6 o'clock in the morning, he begins dropping shoes and fixing up a new stand for the radio in his room. Then he goes out into the backyard and he practices tennis shots up against the house. Then he runs over a few whistling arrangements of popular songs and rides his bicycle up and down the gravel path. You would be surprised at the sound that 2 bicycle wheels can make on a gravel path at 6:30 in the morning. A forest fire might make the same crackling sound, but you probably wouldn't be having a forest fire out in your yard at 6:30 in the morning. Not if you had any sense, you wouldn't. Just what the boys do at camp when they get up at 6 is a mystery. They seem to have some sort of setting up exercises and a swim, more pushing each other off rafts. But they could do that by getting up at 8 and still have a good long day ahead of them. I never knew anyone yet who got up at 6 who did anything more useful between that time and breakfast than bang a tennis ball up against the side of the house, waiting for the civilized members of the party to get up. We have to do enough waiting in this life without getting up early to wait for breakfast. Next summer, I have a good mind to run a boys' camp of my own. It will be on Lake Chabangagog, Chabanagog. Yes, there is, too, in Webster, Massachusetts. And I will call it Camp Chabangagog for manly boys. And by the word manly, I will mean like men. In other words, everyone shall sleep as long as they want, and when they do get up, there'll be no depleting settings up exercises. The day will be spent just like the individual camper gosh darn pleases. No organized hikes. I'd like a word on the hike problem someday too. No camp spirit. No talk about tomorrow's manhood. And no pushing people off of rafts. All right, ladies and gentlemen. All right, that is it for Benchley Night tonight. The last Sunday of April, on to May. And in May, join us for Homer Price. All right, thank you all. You take good care. Go Pirates. Hope springs eternal. Very tall cousin. Hope springs eternal. Bye-bye.